Hello, folks. There, slightly slow getting going there today. Michael Verney wanted to get his nicest Perry top on. To be fair, it's looking well on you. We're brought to you by OurGameRetro.com. I'm wearing the Cork retro jersey here. If you want this, go to OurGameRetro.com, put in the promo code OurGame, you get 15% off. Although I feel there's probably been a few private houses in Cork over the weekend after the pastes and given out to them by Limerick. Michael Verney, any thoughts on the weekend broadly, starting off? The scoring seems to be the big talking point.
Shane, apologies for the delay there. As you said, I was just getting my hair fixed, actually, would you believe? The high scoring was probably what most people were talking about. I think there's loads of different probably factors at play there. Be it the weight of the ball, be it the, where some of the games are taking place in smaller kind of, provincial venues or county grounds, the likes of Pearse Stadium and the likes of Parnell Park as well, which would traditionally be smaller grounds, but we're kind of a peculiar bunch. 1 week we're giving out about too many frees. The next week we're giving out that there's too many scores. There was an awful, Galway put up a massive amount of their tally from play yesterday. So we can't have it everywhere. I do think we'll come across a happy balance between the two, between scores from play and scores from frees. But this was a much better weekend. We'd loads of things to talk about. That first half in Salt Hill yesterday was just bizarre, really. The game up in Corrigan Park was,
magic.
Magic was probably the best way to describe it. Just having people back there and having that noise. But I think it was actually a really good weekend of hurling. And it shouldn't be just clouded by what essentially, Shane, was an exhibition match where defences weren't that interested in defending that for long stages.
Yeah, I'll just run through the results anyway for anyone who was hiding under a rock this weekend or were off doing other things, maybe getting baton charged out on the streets because they were doing a bit of public drinking. But whatever it is, I'll just run through the scores. So Limerick beat Cork 33 points to 219. And I think Cork papered over the cracks by getting a few goals and sort of putting a bit of gloss on the scoreline. Limerick were totally in charge there. Limerick put 427 on Westmeath, who put up 16 points at Cusack Park. And Galway and Waterford, 428 to 323. It's a head scratcher of a scoreline. We'll come to that again. In Division 1B, Kilkenny beat Laois 129 to 22. Clare put up 34 points on Dublin Parnell Park to the host 223. Antrim 121, Wexford 218, a thrilling draw. And we'll run through the other divisions as well. But again, massive scorelines put up. Carlow put up 528, Offaly 525, Kerry 430, Kildare 425 as well. So it was absolutely relentless. Now, there was plenty of high-profile people who were putting out their tweets and thoughts. I think you might have a message there from the likes of Eddie Brennan and Jackie Tyrrell that were on Twitter. If you don't have them, I'll check them in a second. But Killian Curran, he tweeted, "Hey lads, just an interesting take on the games recently. The amount of scores is incredible. Just 4 games yesterday," and this he's referring to Saturday, "produced a combined 231 points. Dare I say it, are there just too many scores? Look at the 78 final, every bit as intense as a game. However, much less scores back then. Are forwards now just too good, or are defenders getting worse? The incredible scoring rate in hurling is across all grades. Is it getting too easy to score? Don't get me wrong, I love to see scoring, but it is strange." Do you know what? As I was watching Galway against Waterford in Salt Hill, as the game wore on and the scoreline kept going up and up and up, it just felt like watching a training match. I actually it got a bit wearisome for me eventually.
Yeah, I tell you something, it's very difficult when you're working at a match like that. I can tell you that. Literally, people don't realise, you're literally, who got that canning free, whatever, and then the ball has gone over the bar another end, and sometimes you don't even catch what's going on. It's literally that quick. As I said, there was a challenge game kind of feel to it. There was an element of, I'll put it this way. Can you remember many big challenges going in yesterday? Do you remember, someone getting in someone's face? A lot of the time when you had the ball, you had time and space. Another thing I'd say is on the high scores this weekend, you have to remember, are there going to be better conditions for hurling this year than there were over the past 2 days? There were literally perfect conditions. There was no, the ground is absolutely rock hard. Conditions are perfect. There was very little wind. There was even not that much wind in Pearse Stadium, which is unheard of. And there was little or no breeze in O'Connor Park, which is also unheard of. So conditions were literally perfect nearly all across the country. So there's various things could play into it as well. Plus the proximity to championship as well. There is an element of lads keeping things close enough to the chest. Like, you're not, I put it to you this way, you know, if you're going to be getting in lads' faces for championship, which every team is, you're not necessarily going to do that a month out from that. The Limerick Cork game being probably a case in point.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So I'm just going to run through some of the amount of chances that were scored in some of the games over the weekend. I thought they were, you know, pretty incredible at times, it must be said. And I'll start off with the Waterford and Galway game. 90 scoring chances in that game. So that means we'll remove extra time from, or injury time from it for a second. Like, you're talking about more than a chance every single minute, and which obviously means the ball is going dead for 10, 15, 20 seconds. In the game between Westmeath and Tipperary, I had tracked 77 scoring chances, again, more than one a minute. Then the game between Limerick and Cork, 56 chances for Cork, for Limerick, 34 for Cork. So again, you're looking at 90 chances there, which is nuts. Let's see, we'll move on to Clare against Dublin. Again, 85 chances. Moving back then to the game between Antrim and Wexford, crucially, far fewer. Now, there was still 72 overall, 38 and 34, but far fewer. I wonder how much the crowd being there kind of contributes to that. Nisha Waldron and Owen O'Neill did a report from there, and it just seemed thrilling. I think we've touched on this before. It's far easier to keep your head, and, you know, when you don't have that sort of maelstrom atmosphere around you. Like, it does feel like a training match, and you can probably do all the skills, like all the communication is perfect around you. Everyone can hear you. You know, take your time, turn, give the ball back, whatever it might be. Whereas when you're playing in a massive occasion, and like Nisha was saying that the 500 felt like 5,000 up there, the idea of calming down and not driving a ball long now and again. Actually, there was a lot of long ball in that game. I don't know if that contributed to it. I mean, just think of the goals that Wexford got. One of them was a high ball that broke. But do you think, will this calm down once crowds are back? Like, even the All-Ireland final last year, I have my notes from last year, there was 48 scoring chances for Limerick and 43 for Waterford. So you're talking over 90 chances in an All-Ireland final. So is the crowd the bottom line to this, and is this going to stop?
I do think the crowd is a massive thing. I put it to you this way, Shane. Say you're a debutant corner forward and you get beaten to the first two balls or whatever, and then all of a sudden, you know, your head is down. Just the way of the GA and the way of the world and the way of spectators, you're going to have boys yelling in at you. Oh, he's in your pocket. This kind of crack, you know, you're not going to get another ball. Whereas now, you know, if you're beaten to the first two balls, what about it? You just go and take another shot. Doesn't matter. Ball's going to be in play probably in 15 or 20 seconds again. I definitely think the pressure is off forwards, and particularly off younger players as well. I do think as well, with the lack of fans, the ball is been from when it goes over the end line to when it's restarted. I do think that's a lot quicker as well, just because, you know, there's no noise, there's no applause, you're not waiting for anything. The ball is just back in play again. So I do think there are a lot of mitigating factors. It's interesting you mentioned Antrim and Wexford. That was one of the only games, not the only game, that had a real championship feel to it. And it had fans there, it had all the pressure, it had all the physicality, it had lads getting in each other's faces. You weren't able to take a shot as easy. You weren't able to get away a shot. There was always someone breathing down your neck. And I think when, I don't know if how many people we're going to have at big games this year, but when people start coming back in, I do think the amount of chances will be reduced. I think people will be. I think the corner forward that missed a shot and will take on the next shot without even thinking about it. When there's fans back in there and there's a bit more pressure on, they probably will think about it a bit more. And I just think you won't be able to probably play with as much freedom. I'd say there's some forwards there and they're just absolutely licking their lips. And from a back's point of view, the ball just seems to be coming. There's so much pressure on them. It's almost relentless at times.
Yeah, it was. Do you know what? I was in Dublin, Clare, and Parnell Park. It was a bit frustrating at times watching lads lining up frees from 100 yards. Like, Tony Kelly's brilliant at the frees, don't get me wrong, but, you know, the same as we've said in other games where lads are scoring from 100 yards. It's a little bit frustrating to watch someone go back all the way to their own 45 and knock it over and nearly knock it out of the venue altogether. It just feels a little bit kind of silly. Not blaming any of the players. Of course, you're going to take those on, but it does feel ludicrous, and we're probably moving to a point where something is going to have to happen with the slitter. But I still say, let's wait till crowds come back and see how that affects the game. I wouldn't like any, you know, a bit like the disadvantage rule, as we're calling it recently. Let's not make any snap decisions and do something.
There's not a hope of that happening, Shane. Of course we're going to make a snap decision. Sure, we brought in all these rules. We brought in all these rules with very little research or basis behind them. So next, we'll be playing with a bowling ball or a cricket ball next year, the way things are going at the moment. Well, I'd be the same as you. I'd wait till we have concrete facts. Like, what does a real hurling match look like? A real hurling match, championship game, looks at, there's about 10 or 15,000 people at least there. There's all the pressure of that. Wait till we have that before we make any concrete decisions, or until we have concrete evidence, don't make any more seismic kind of decisions.
Yeah, like, I mean, Callum Lyons was brilliant, scoring 5 from play from wing back, but that shouldn't really be happening. Guys back that far and they're able to score that much. Some of them were long rangers. Dara Gray scored 3 or 4 from play for Dublin a couple of weeks ago. I think that was against Antrim. And, we see a nice bit of it, and like frees from 100 yards, it just gets a bit silly. But Jackie Tyrrell had tweeted yesterday, this was during the Galway Waterford game, or just after, I might say a prayer to St. Anthony tonight, see if he can find the art of defending. Seems to be gone from the game. Eddie Brennan also goes, some free-flowing hurling in Galway Waterford, a bit like a challenge game nobody wants to get injured in. Near a bit of proper defending, but some scoring. Platini influence. And like Tomas McCarthy, he's from the Waterford Journalist. He tweeted 5 points from play from Callum Lyons today. He has scored 218 from wing back since Liam Cahill took charge, which is quite something altogether. Do you think the art of defending is gone? Like, put it this way, right? And I'm not actually picking on Galway, because I think they're a really good team, excellent players, and they're as close to Limerick as anybody is at the moment. But if you look at their backline, Sean Loftus has been I know he wasn't cornerback and he was wearing a wing forwards jersey at the weekend, got a few nice scores. He's been often played at cornerback in recent times. Shane Cooney, who's a centre-back for St. Thomas's, he's played corner. Now, that happens a lot. Lads go to the county, they're centre-back with their club and they play cornerback or whatever. But, like, is there a lot of players that aren't necessarily man markers or, all their lives cornerbacks that are now playing in those positions?
Yeah, we talked about the surplus of halfbacks in a lot of squads. So you have a lot of,
we mentioned Kilkenny for sure, didn't we?
So you have a lot of halfbacks playing cornerback, and I suppose, like, no more than Callum Lyons, I'm not saying he's not a good defender, of course he is, but one of his best attributes is going forward, but yet his primary function should be to defend. So there are definitely there's definitely more attack-minded defenders playing now. It is also harder to defend, Shane, as well. Like, if a guy comes at you, it does seem like if there's any contact, or if the forward goes to ground, or if a player goes to ground anywhere, it does make the referee make a decision. A lot of the time they're making the decision to give a free.
Well, even look at the red cards over the weekend now. I know by the book, Owen O'Donnell had to go. Yeah, fine. By the book, of the second yellow card in his situation, by the book, Matt O'Hanlon had to go, helmet pull. We all know you can't do that. But, I mean, in a lot of cases, you're like, does that really merit a team being down to 14 men? So as a defender now, you're left totally exposed. If you pull a guy down at all, it's probably a black card and a sin bin. We saw the sin bins as well. Was it Dara Egerton got one for Westmeath against Tipperary? I might have the wrong name there, but yeah, I think it's so hard to be a defender now. You're completely thrown to the wolves. I think a lot of players in the middle eight now are a bit like, well, look, we're just kind of almost, some teams are just holding their shape a little bit. Some players have man-marking duties. But you I think you're able to just leave the other boys to the wolves and hope that, sweeping centre back will cover in there. But it's a really, really difficult job back there now.
Yeah, and teams probably, and a lot of players probably didn't realise just how hard it was in that kind of last line of defence. Like, it's I don't know what you'd call it in there. You're literally treading across a line, and that line is so fine, and the safety blanket of potentially pulling a guy down like that is completely gone now. And maybe that's the reason why we're seeing a lot more goals as well too, because that kind of option is not there anymore. It's funny because if that's the case, then we wanted more goals, and now we're almost giving out that we have too many scores. So, like, you can't please everyone. I do think it will settle down. Don't even try and tell me that a championship game is going to resemble what we saw in Pearse Stadium yesterday. A championship game is in your face, everything on the line. You have to remember, in this league, realistically, there is zero on the line. As long as you don't finish bottom of your group, that's it. You're safe, and you're just building towards championship. So, like, they do have the feeling of exhibition matches because they are essentially exhibition matches.
There's plenty of comments coming in, and as ever, we're delighted to get your comments, so please do send them in. We'll read out as many as we can. So Eamon Ray, a heavier ball will just lead to more hand passing and precise play rather than people competing in the air. Also, no surprise to Kilkenny ex-players crying about the state of the game on Twitter. I'm sure Eddie and Jackie wouldn't necessarily appreciate that. I do agree that the heavier ball will lead to more hand passing, and like if teams sit back, it'll be probably harder to work it through because you can't just go over the cover as easily. But I'd be more thinking, can a ball, take maybe 20-25% off the distance rather than taking like 50% off the distance or anything more like that? So I'm not looking for probably as dramatic a change as that might suggest.
Shane, it's not like a radical weight difference. It's just that the score from 100 yards, it should be maximum effort. Do you know what I mean?
It used to be hard to score 65.
Yeah, there you go. It used to be. And now, I've been chatting Colm Keys in the Independent about this only a week or two ago. Like a 65 is no longer fit for purpose almost now. It should nearly be taken from the middle of the field. But I'm just saying that to score from distance should be a feat. It should be a maximum effort. It shouldn't be, Neil McManus scoring from his own 45 or between his own 45 and 21 and the ball nearly carrying the ball stopper.
Yeah, you mean some of the pitch, they're all different sizes as well. So some pitches like Parnell Park wouldn't be as long as, I presume, Pearse Stadium as well. I haven't been over in Pearse Stadium for a while, but I don't think it would be as long. Another comment in from Shane Kelleher. Lads, do you think it's an overreaction to the heavy scoring? Will things even out championship because you'll have two teams trying to win going 100 miles an hour? Yeah, I think we've kind of said that. Also, Connor Heaney, a heavier ball will just lead to more hand passing. Oh, sorry, I read that already.
Any excuse to bring up about Kilkenny players, ex-players crying, you brought them back again.
Chris Conlon, Tip will win the All-Ireland this year.
Well, I tell you something, Chris, you've definitely delivered a fairly positive and welcome message for the man in the Cork, the man sporting a Cork jersey this morning.
Yeah, it's a. You just never know. It's a bit early days. We've seen up and down in Tipperary. We'll talk about them a little bit more in a while. Jimmy Juice's bar. Well, lads, the day may well be missing a few lads, but sure, look, aren't we all? The Tribe lads were ridiculous the last day. What do you think of their odds for the All Ireland? Like I think I've said it before, and I'll just repeat it again. I think Galway are next in line after Limerick. Yes, like they pushed Limerick really close in the All Ireland semi-final last year. Was it a 3-point game? Well, they kept them within a score going down the stretch, but it did feel like Limerick had another gear there. But I think Limerick or Galway are as equipped as anybody. I think Henry Shefflin, when I was interviewing him last week, he had like Limerick, Galway, and kind of Kilkenny there. I can't remember if he said Tipperary are in that same band or maybe slightly below or above. It's hard to know. What would your sort of 1, 2, 3, 4 be?
Yeah, and I think within the 1, 2, 3, 4, there's probably a gap between 3 and 4. I think I'd have Galway a clear second. I probably still have Tip just ahead of Kilkenny, and like Waterford. The only reason Waterford technically should be 2 because they were beaten the All Ireland final last year, but just with Tadhg de Bourke missing this year and the question marks I suppose over their defence, probably be Limerick, Galway, Tip, Kilkenny, Waterford, something like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But again, we don't exactly know what we've seen from everybody so far, and I think, like, we'll go through it, I'm sure, in detail over the next while. Like the Waterford we saw on Sunday, I don't expect that to be the Waterford we see come championship.
Yeah, I would say I'd have Limerick number 1. I'd have Galway and Tip number 2. Now, the reason I'd have Galway and Tip jointly number 2 is, well, Tipperary won the All Ireland more recently than Galway, so that obviously gives them some sort of a nod. But also, how much of an influence did the Cathal Barrett red card have to the qualifier game last year? And then the next thing is, like, Tipperary may have won that game. And then the other thing is, who's got the better players sort of emerging this year? So it's difficult to tell. I think they're fairly close. I think Kilkenny and Waterford, I mean, I don't think there's any reason to have Kilkenny ahead of Waterford, considering Waterford beat them in an All-Ireland semi-final last year. And other than that blip on the opening day and maybe a little bit of a collapse in this game against Galway, they were 7 points ahead. And Galway, just what a turnaround in that particular game. But yeah, I'd probably have Limerick, and they're a step ahead. Then Tip, Galway together. Then maybe Waterford, Kilkenny. And I think Cork not too far off. Like, as I said last week, just forget the result at the weekend. I still think Cork are capable of beating pretty much anybody, but it's just putting it together for the full season.
Basically, you're hoping. I know what you're hoping.
Don't do this to me. Don't do this to me.
No. You don't think Tip can win the All Ireland by beating Limerick, but you think Galway will beat Limerick, and then Tip will beat Galway. I know. If you think Tip will win the All Ireland, I reckon that's your logic.
You think I want someone to do the dirty work for me?
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first or last time, I'm sure.
Would you rule out Tipperary beating Limerick this year in championship?
I couldn't see Tip beating Limerick in championship this year. Being honest with you,
it feels at the moment like it would require everything to go right, because I don't even know if they fully know what the Tipperary starting 15 will be going into championship. So I don't know how you could really say we'll definitely beat Limerick this year. I'm sure they definitely believe it in the camp. But doing it is another thing altogether. I'll just run through a couple of more comments. Shane Kelleher, like Cork had no interest winning Saturday, just wanted to get minutes into lads before July 3rd. We might pick up that point, because as I watch the game and you're looking at the team and you're thinking this is probably closer to a third of the Cork team, give or take, that we would expect to see in championship, and maybe closer to 2/3 with Limerick. And Limerick probably have a deeper panel, and one that has, I know Colin Coughlin, they're playing wing back and getting a couple of lovely points, and that he's probably not that experienced, but clearly he looks like he's a really talented player. But it probably is a Limerick panel that when you take one of the subs and throw them into the team, these lads have been fairly exposed to top level competition anyway, so it's not as disruptive to your team as when Cork dip into their panel and bring in lads who they don't look as conditioned. They look a little bit slimmer, slighter, probably not used to playing against the likes of a Limerick. So you're kind of throwing them far more in at the deep end than you are with Limerick. So if I was Cork and you're looking at the manner of this defeat, particularly in the first half and the first quarter, I mean, Limerick had 3 times as many scoring opportunities in the first quarter as Cork, something like 19-6. Like, I don't think you can be as alarmed as you might be for Cork when you know the amount of players they can bring in, and even the impact you saw Horgan and Meade having when they come on at half-time. They steadied the ship.
Just on the viewer's point there, they may not have necessarily wanted to win the game, but at half-time, they definitely wanted to save face, and they definitely wanted to get something out of the second half. And I think they definitely did. And by bringing in Horgan and Meade was, a nod to that. I think they realised there was times in the first half where they maybe went away from what they'd been trying to do over the previous 3 games before that, but they definitely went back to it in the second half. I think if we're going into that game now, I think there was an awful lot. I think there was an awful lot learned from both sides. For example, we talked about Mark Coleman getting, a stupid amount of touches in various games and building from the back. And fair enough, he set up their first goal, but you could count on one hand the amount of times he was actually able to get possession the other day. Keane Lynch brought him on a tour of the Gaelic grounds, and I think that was exactly, that's definitely something that they'll be looking to exploit in Championship, is to actually make Coleman mark. Make him think about other things apart from getting on possession and distributing. That was definitely one thing that Limerick will learn. I think we said as well that if Seamus Harnady's not playing, and even if he is playing, that what do you want to make Cork do? You want to try and make them put a ball down 50-50, and they had to put a few balls down 50-50, and they got no joy out of him. Dermot Burns was on top in the air, Hannon was as well, and Colin Coughlin was too. So Limerick pressed really, really high on Cork, tried to make them uncomfortable, and they did, and I expect that that's something you're going to see on July 3rd. So, you can talk about shadow box and all you like. Are we going to see that on July 3rd again? I think we definitely are. Like Limerick learned, there was a couple of valuable lessons that Limerick learned, and don't get me wrong, there were a couple of things that Cork learned as well.
In a way, have Limerick shown their hand to these Cork players? Because Cork would have wanted to get a dry run for what it's like in Championship, particularly for players who may not be established in the team just yet, but they might want to start introducing them in Championship. And we can name some of the young players, but probably unfair to single them out, that probably didn't really give the greatest performances of all time, but completely understandably so. But they've now shown Cork, this is what you're going to be up against, and they have a lot to analyse, and they can sort of, I'm sure they'll have their cameras set up to sort of track, be able to look at and analyse how Limerick set traps and how they harass you. So they actually have a few weeks now to be able to go into that game and say, this is exactly what we're going to face. And a point I always make in GA both hurling and football, is that it's the same as the set piece in rugby. That if you get your puck outs right, I think you've got a really good platform for the rest of the game. So where was the biggest area that killed Cork in this game? It was the puck outs, and not necessarily just the deliveries from Patrick Collins, but how the players tried to get away from Limerick, how they were under so much pressure from the hunting in packs. So if Cork can go in and they can have learned from this experience and get away far more of their puck outs, which is a big if, they will have learned an awful lot, and this pacing will have been well worth it. And I'd love people to get into get their comments and let me know what they think of that.
Yeah, they'll have definitely learned quite a bit, and obviously there's a lot of inexperience out there too, as well. As you say, when not saying that they're going to have a huge amount more experience. A lot of the guys are younger, but I would say they probably would have with their starting 15, they're probably going to have a better class of player and guys that have maybe more exposure at senior level. I also think, Shane, that while it broke down regularly, like when they were able to, break that initial Limerick press, I think they got an awful lot of joy, put Limerick on the back foot an awful lot, created a lot of goal scoring chances. Jack O'Connor should have had a goal. Richie English saved off the line as well. Like, it wouldn't have been inconceivable for them to have 4 or 5 goals. Limerick didn't really threaten the goal, and I think that will be. I think I'm not sure about keeping the cards close to the chest. Apart from the personnel being different, I think both teams learned an awful lot. And while Cork did take a bit of a pace, and I think they'll be optimistic enough that if they're able to put Limerick on the back foot like they did at different stages, that they can hit the onion bag 3 or 4 times. And if they do in a championship game, they're going to be really, really hard beaten.
Yeah, that's true. Any other thoughts from that game? Like you mentioned Cork creating goal chances, and if any team is going to be able to run at you, it is Cork. But can they get on the front foot enough to be able to do that again when they meet in the Munster semi-final? I don't know. I mean, you come away from it thinking, right, Limerick have put up 20 points in the first half. You as a Cork team have really struggled. You only created 14 chances in the entirety of the first half. But I don't know. I don't come away from it feeling that despondent if I'm looking at Cork's chances.
No, I wouldn't be that despondent at all, to be honest with you. I definitely wouldn't be. And as I said, as Kieran Kingston said after, I think the key thing was that they stuck to what they're trying to do. Will their game plan be a month further down the line when they play Limerick? It will. Are they going to get more pressure than they got last Saturday night? Of course they are. The one worry you would have is physically, it did not that it looked like boys against men, but the Cork team are much slighter. Even Colin Coughlin, who's only doing I think he's starting his leaving cert on Wednesday, and Cathal O'Neill as well. They came in and they do both look like big men for that age. Like, Limerick would be able to bully Cork somewhat physically. Obviously, Cork will try to not let them do that at all, and will try not to engage in that kind of warfare, and instead ping the ball around. But I definitely think there was a lot to be learned on both sides, without a doubt. And I was interested to see Limerick's tackling style change. The hands stayed down an awful lot more. They didn't let the hands go up around the head as much, particularly in the first half, and in that first half where they totally dominated Cork.
Do you think that was that was something that Limerick thought about beforehand to make sure that they weren't caught in the tackle?
100%, yeah. Like, they gave away an awful lot of frees against Waterford the 2 weeks previous. Like, if they're gonna be blown for a chain, you're not, like, what's the definition of insanity? Keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect, like, they had given, I think 45% of their scores had been from place balls. How many place balls did they give away the other night? Not
20.
near, not yeah. But in the first half, I think they conceded 6 frees.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the second half here. Patrick Horgan free in the 37th minute. Patrick Horgan frees in the 56th, 57th, 59th minute. And he got 1 or 2 more later on in the game. So maybe they're not perfect. But yeah, I agree with you. In a general sense, they certainly did seem to be ironing that out. Another point I'd make is that Cork did stick to the game plan that we've seen throughout the season. So it became very notable in the Tipperary match how much they were working the ball out from the back. And even when it was going wrong here, they persevered with it. In fact, like, once or twice, they went with long puck-outs. And I remember Diarmaid Burns soaring into the skies and catching one at one stage. And you're like, well, look, that is what's going to happen if you go along on top of a big man like him. You know, the Cork forwards aren't going to be favoured in those situations. But they stuck to that game plan. And they also stuck to the game plan of going for goals. I remember one point, I I think it might have been Shane Kingston. He was pushing for goal when it seemed like there was a handy point on, and your team probably needed a score at that stage. But they were going for goal, and that's something that we saw against Waterford the first day. Scored 5, could have scored 10. Scored 7 against Westmeath the last day. So they're putting the focus on goals, and I don't think they're going to stop no matter what. And that, to me, said that this result wasn't the biggest deal in the world, that they just want to see do they have goals in them against Limerick. And then Kieran Kingston will be able to say for the next few weeks, lads, when we run at them now, when we're fully tuned in for this, there's goals to be had.
Yeah, I don't think they have any interest in hitting 33 or 34 points anymore. I think they'd much prefer to be getting, 5-20 or something like that. I think they want green flags. And I think from a neutral's point of view, looking at what's coming during the summer, and you're thinking, yeah, Cork game is going to be really, really exciting. Are they going to be open at the back? They might be a small bit. Are they going to be free-flowing in attack? Yes, and they're going to go for the net every chance they can get.
No, okay. So we'll move on from the Limerick and Cork game from now. If anyone has any thoughts, please send them in. So Tipperary had a heavy win over Westmeath, 427 to 16 points. Really,
what do you learn in a game like this, Shane? Like, what did you from as a tip, a supporter looking in? What did you learn from this? The one question I'd ask as well. I saw the list of scores and I saw that Callan only got a point. I presume he was just easing his way back into things. But what did you learn exactly from this?
Yeah, he had a point scored. I think it was within a minute. I think both himself and Michael Breen had a point on the board after a couple of seconds. Then Cathal Barrett set one up for Callan. The game was done before it even started, which, is a little bit of a shame. It's an impossible task for Shane O'Brien at the moment as Westmeath manager. But anyway, look, be that as it may. Just some of the other lads who got scores. Jason Ford, he pitched in with 2-6. John McGrath, 1-2. Like you said, Callan on a point. Noel McGrath, who kind of ran the show a little bit. Dan McCormick was very good midfield. Paddy Cadell doing decently as well. Brendan Maher returned and played the game at centre-back. So what did I take from it? There's probably not a whole pile you can take from it, but John McGrath getting 1-2 is probably not worth dismissing, or not to be dismissed, because he probably wants to get his form back to where it needs to be. Seamus Callan just getting a full game into him, I think that's kind of important, because he probably needs to see it for himself, that his body's okay, that he can kind of hit the ground running. Craig Morgan coming on as a sub, he's a lad we've probably talked about before, that can he come in and make an impact for Tipperary as a defensive option. He was an under-20 captain a couple of years ago, looks promising. Mark Keogh came in and scored 1-2. I mean, again, he's a player of promise, but probably needs to just transfer to the senior stage at this point. Noel McGrath is, I think he's motoring very well in the half-forward line. But what do I take from it? I'm not really sure what you can take from it, because, what can you take from a challenge match? Lads are in decent form. They're playing okay. But, it was a bit of a massacre.
It's game time into lads' legs. That's basically it. And it's known that Mark Keogh, these boys, lads that maybe haven't got too many chances up until now, are, ready to come in and take a chance if it arises. But there's not that much to be learned from a game like that, realistically.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just seeing, is there anything else? Yeah, there was a red card for Robert Burns. So, it's probably a little bit of needless. Again, one of these red cards that I didn't think was for a whole lot, like a little flick out, and that's fine. By the letter of the law, that is a red card, but it just felt a little bit kind of soft. But I'm not saying the player was soft, but the whole thing, it just feels like some of these red cards are a little bit soft. And you know what? It feels like you're going to be called a dinosaur if you say you want the game to be manly and you want fewer red cards, and let lads get on with it, and let's go with the law of the jungle rather than the letter of the law. Why is it now wrong to say you like a manly game?
No, there's nothing wrong with that. That's the genesis of hurling was like, it's a physical game. I would have reservations and worries that the physicality is been taken out of it, and like even a big hit now or a big shoulder now, something that would never have been questioned before. It's almost like even a big shoulder is like, oh, was it into the back, or was it too physical, or was it frontal, or whatever? I just worry that that's coming out of the game a bit. Like it's almost like there's a roar for anything like that now. It's like when we always say, like, hurl on hurl now is just a free. That's it. It's just taken as a point. Same as, how maybe a physical challenge is, nearly a free at this stage as well, even if executed perfectly.
7 goals and 51 points were shared between Galway and Waterford in Pearse Stadium. scarcely believable at times. Just some of the guys who put up some big scores. Joe Canning was absolutely brilliant, particularly when he moved into the forward line. He scored 1-8. Conor Whelan got man of the match, and TG Carr scoring 6. Conor Cooney got a hat-trick of points. And Brian Kincannon, who continues to impress, he scored 2-2. Just on the Waterford side of things, Desi Hutchinson was brilliant. He caught a lovely diagonal ball in from Neil Montgomery, turned his man and slashed it into the top corner from, I'd say, around the 21. Absolutely brilliant score. Stephen Bennett got 8 points. Shane Bennett scored 1-1 and set up that early goal for Jack Prendergast, who notched 1-2 against Dahi Burke, who was playing at centre-back. And that was something that stood out to me, that Gearóid McInerney, we'd kind of suggested that maybe that could happen. He would play full-back and Dahi would be released to the half-back line. So it's interesting that Shane O'Neill has gone down that route. He's thinking, I need Dahi's power and pace to drive the team forward and maybe have more of a holding player at full-back in McInerney.
Yeah, it's never going to go perfect the first game out or anything like that. He's never really played senior championship for Galway at centre back. He's played wing back. I see that Owen Mulligan, Conor Whelan, best forward in the country. I would go as far as saying that I think Brian Kincannon is nearly Galway's most important player at this stage.
So you're going against Owen Mulligan's comment there?
Yeah, I think Whelan's unbelievable player, but like Kincannon's form in the last 18 months or so is absolutely outstanding. Scored a goal yesterday in the first half, set up 2 as well. A real kind of unselfish player. Huge time for him, and the reason I have Galway as a clear second favourite for the All-Ireland is just like, if Canning is fit, if Whelan is fit, if Kincannon is fit, they have 3 unmerciful weapons up front. I just really like Kincannon. When Kincannon gets the ball, similar to Whelan, if he gets the ball in hand or is in around the ball, it's nearly a score straight away, or he's looking to kind of tread a pass, and that's not throwing Cathal Mannion into the equation as well, and potentially Joseph Cooney, Niall Burke. Like, it's just, I think Galway,
Conor Cooney as well.
Conor Cooney, Galway really dangerous up front.
They're absolutely stacked in the forward line. When Evan Nyland came in, he's another guy. He was fantastic. He was not. Let me just double check how many points he got, but he was scoring for sport. I thought, this guy is really laying down a bit of a marker here, because he'd started the season in the team, and I thought, and even that first day when Joe Canning came on as a sub, he continued to take the frees. And you're like, oh, is there a bit of a passing of the baton here, even in terms of the frees? No, probably not. But he comes on and scores 4 points. He came on after a half an hour, notched 4 points, and he just seems such an elusive player. When you go through that forward line, it's an embarrassment of riches and the envy of pretty much every other county.
Yeah, no, without a doubt, yeah. Like, there shouldn't be, like, that's why you would just have questions about, why they played a sweeper last year and almost handicapped their attack, in particular in the All-Ireland semi-final. They were trying to stay in the game rather than maybe win the game, containment rather than really pushing on. They have, to me, that's probably the most potent attack in the country. And as crucially as well, while Limerick will put up massive scores, massive point tallies, Galway, like, there's no reason why Galway can't, be hitting the onion bag more with an attack like that. They haven't been as much like in recent years. If you look back, obviously when they won the All-Ireland, they didn't score a goal, I think, for their last 4 games. But with those guys, like, they have the potential. And Whelan can play centre forward now as well. And like, asked the opposition centre back a question. Canning almost ended up in the full forward line by accident. He picked up a knock, he ended up in there, then he ends up getting a goal in there as well. Maybe we'll see a little, it's sometimes inadvertent things like that. They might end up going back to the future now. I think it's 13 years since he made not his debut, but when he really announced himself on the national stage with that, I think it was 2-13 against Cork in that qualifier at full forward, and like, he destroyed Dermot O'Sullivan. So like, maybe you're looking at, he started his career there, maybe he'll end up finishing in there, or maybe at least still have realised that is a viable option again now.
Yeah, like, when he turns and solos at a defence, he's very, very hard to stop. I mean, if you're looking at like who are the speed merchants in the Galway team, and running at defences, who's very difficult to stop. The likes of Conor Whelan's very pacey, Brian Kincannon, Cathal Mannion is like glides across the turf. But when Canning gets going and he gets running, like, number one, he's just hard to stop because he's physically so big and strong, and he's got plenty of speed. But also, if anyone comes towards him, he's going to be able to pick out the pass that punishes you, like that little brick flick over the top for Conor Cooney, which was obviously safe, and then the rebound was knocked in. So I wonder now, is the experiment at midfield over? Was it always an experiment anyway? But whether it was or wasn't, he's now playing himself into some exceptional form.
Yeah, he's playing himself into great form. I think they need to be fairly flexible with where they play him on given days and at different times in games as well. Like, there's no reason why, Canning couldn't go into the edge of the square for 10 minutes before half time in a game. We always talk about different plans at different stages of games. I don't see there's any reason why he couldn't go in there at different stages. Just say, remember he ghosted in at different stages in 2012. He'd be in there, then he might be in the corner at one stage, and he might be in full forward. There's no reason why they can't do that again. If they see that they're not, that a defense is quite packed, they can also bring him out the field and let him do damage from out there. But they have an awful lot of weapons, and even like Adrian Toohey, who's been very good at wing back in general this campaign, goes up wing forward, ends up getting on a goal. Did you see where he started his run from when Concannon got the ball? He was on the 45 and he got in to the edge of the box in record quick time and flicked that ball to net. I think it was at the second attempt. But he was brilliant out the field a bit more. Sean Loftus was better out the field again, who'd been playing cornerback in previous games. So they've got lots of options. It's a matter of actually probably at the back where we need to talk more. It's actually nailing down, are they going to go with Dahi Burke at 6 and Gerald McInerney at 3, and who are the pieces around them going to be then as well? But you're probably looking at Pádraig Mannion 5, Fintan Burke 7.
That's a fair half back line.
Yeah, and Aidan Hart is solid as a rock and a kind of a real utility player and probably a man marker maybe in the corner. And then you'd say maybe the other spot between maybe Loftus, Darren
Shane
Morrissey
Cooney,
as well.
Darren
Shane
Morrissey,
Cooney,
yeah.
So like that's a fairly formidable half back line in fairness. Now you're not gonna you look at the traditional lines of how hard is it to break down an opposition's half back line. That's going to be difficult, and they're all real mobile players as well.
Yeah, and we'll see where Davy Burke comes into the pecking order as well. Dennis Walsh did a good piece in the Sunday Times, and he was talking about Galway and maybe one last shot for some of these players. And he goes, as things stand, there are 7 30-somethings on the Galway panel fighting for a place in the Championship 15. 5 could start. The past 5 All-Ireland winning teams have had a combined total of 5 30-somethings in their starting lineups. 3 of those players were goalies. No team had more than 2. Can Galway manage 4 or 5 on one team and hope to go all the way? It cannot just be a numbers game, which is interesting. I would have thought there would have been more on that Tip team in 2019, because the way even the year beforehand there was all this talk that Tip were over the hill. But maybe I think a lot of those were like 29, about to hit 30. But a very interesting point from Dennis Walsh there. Do you think that will hold them back this year? I don't think so.
No, I think they've got an awful lot.
I mean, it's a fair point from Dennis and absolutely well made. But I think this year there's enough in that Galway team to suggest there's an All-Ireland there.
Yes, and also you don't have to start them all. You can move them in. Like Aidan Hart could come in. Would say Conor Cooney could come in. Joseph Cooney could come in. They don't necessarily have to start them all. It's probably finding that balance. Maybe David Burke is going to be a finisher this year. Maybe he's going to be coming in for the last 25 minutes on games, but there's definitely no doubt in their talent. And while the likes of maybe Davy Burke has had a knock, generally the majority of those guys have had a pretty decent run. Maybe Canning has had a couple of knocks. The majority of them have had a pretty decent run and have managed to stay injury free. So don't see that hindering them too much. I put it to you this way: if they have 30-somethings, are Galway a slow team? To me, no, they're definitely not a slow team. So it's different if you're 30-something and the pace is starting to catch you or something like that. I definitely don't think that's the case with Galway.
Yeah, when you put Cathal Mannion, Brian Concannon, Conor Whelan, Pádraig Mannion can move. There's definitely another player or two that I'm missing out there as well. There's no shortage of pace in that team.
Sean Loftus chased back Ozzie Deason yesterday and made ground on him.
That's the
type of athlete you're talking about there.
A perfect place to start talking about Waterford. They were 7 points ahead in this game and they ended up losing it and, looking like they were struggling and gasping for air at a couple of points in this game. Austin Gleeson at centre-back. This was a game where I think we saw, maybe it's not going to be the long-term position for him. And as I said last week, I think he can play it. But it's a couple of times he kind of bundled in with sort of awkward forward-type tackles, gave away a couple of silly frees. And I just kind of, as I was watching, I was like, I'm just not 100% sure if this is the spot for him. And also, obviously, because he can score 4 or 5 from play at the other end. I'm just not sure about it.
I just don't think he's defence minded, and I think with a centre back nowadays, I think you have to be defence first. Like, look at Declan Hannon. Yeah, no problem. He'll stroll forward and get a couple of points if he can, but his primary duty is to protect Dan Morrissey or to protect Sean Finn or protect whoever it is playing in the full back line. And this is not a fault to Gleeson. I just don't think that's his primary thought. It doesn't come in, it's not the first thing that comes into his head. I think the first thing that comes into his head is, oh, here's an opportunity, let's go get on the ball. Then all of a sudden, you've left a big area free in the Waterford defence. I just think someone like, and I know he's an elder statesman, I wouldn't be like that surprised if Kevin Moran ended up centre back at some stages this year, or even playing in a sweeper role. Irla Daly will definitely play that defensive role. He's not. I think kind of nowadays with centre back, you don't need to be flashy. You need to do your primary function, and that's
you need to be very safe on the ball, very smart, sense danger, have good anticipation of where the ball is going to go. But playing centre back and being an effective sweeper, I think it's going to get more and more difficult, because teams like Cork, teams like Limerick are going to look after the ball so much when they're working it up the field that they're going to work it into a position where they can pin the ball into their inside forwards and the centre back can't get near it. It's going to become a tougher and a tougher job.
Yeah, you're going to see that position evolve again. What exactly it'll evolve into, I'm not so sure. Maybe you're going to start to see more defences just going man on man, and even a defender going man on man, and Mark Coleman following Keane Lynch out the pitch when Limerick have the ball, and then trying to play that free role when Cork have the ball. But it's going to be interesting to see what it changes. If you look at it, like if you compare it to, you had Shawnee McMahon on Our Game last week. If you compare the way he played centre back, the way Hubert Rigney played centre back for Offaly, it's just poles apart from how Declan Hannon plays or how Mark Coleman wants to play. It's just a completely different role. Your positioning even is completely different. The type of ball, the way the ball comes down near you is completely different. Like, there's just no longer, you just don't launch a 100-yard ball anymore. So I just think Ozzy is a weapon to them up front, and I think they just need to be. I think he can do more damage up front, and I'm not saying he's a liability in defence. I just don't think that's his natural instinct.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move on to the Kilkenny against Laois game here. So it finished up 129 to Kilkenny, 22 points to Laois. Just some of the scorers for Kilkenny. Owen Cody scored 11 points. Now he got 9 placed balls. James Bergen again. Now he was taken off the first day against Wexford, didn't go his way, but I think Brian Cody and plenty of us who have been watching Kilkenny this season saw enough in the Connie man. He threw in from the start and he scored 5 here. Liam Blanchfield scored 1-2, bundling in his goal during the first half. Conor Fogarty returned to midfield. He scored a couple, as did Richie Reid beside him. And Martin Keown and Billy Ryan, who had scored 1-4 against Wexford, looked brilliant. He got a point here. And then on the Laois side of things, PJ Scully, he scored 11 points, one of those from play. And Ross King scored 3 points. Paddy Purcell with a couple as well. This game was never really in doubt, though, and just business as usual for Kilkenny, what you'd expect in this fixture.
Yeah, no, in fairness, anytime they're putting up big scores, even without TJ, the 2 days they played without him, they were still able to win convincingly enough. I think, Kilkenny are doing what you expect them to do. I think the one worry is that, from a Kilkenny point of view, is the team has changed around a lot. Are you any closer to realising what their midfield duo is going to be? I'm not so sure. Are you any closer to realising who their 2 wing backs are going to be? Is Conor Brown going to play wing back, or is he going to play midfield? I'm not so sure. So that's the one thing. While they've put up kind of good displays and they've definitely modernised their style of play, they're definitely mixing the short and the long, and I'd say they're going short more so than not. Just be a little bit worried from a Kilkenny point of view as in who's going to play midfield. Are they going to have a partnership?
Who's in midfield, as Buff would say?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, who's Fogarty could be there. Fogarty and Buckley could be there. Does that sound like that's not a good mix to me at this stage of the day? I don't know if the 2 of them can cover the ground that they'll need to be able to cover. So I'm just confused. Confused about who's going to be playing in a few of those kind of crucial roles. And we've talked about midfield before with them. Midfield has been an interchangeable feast with them. And as a result of that, all of a sudden you're playing against Waterford and your midfield is totally out of it when you really, really need to get a foothold in the game. So while the results have been very good and it's 4 from 4 and they're going to top the group, and if they meet whoever's top of the other group, that'll be a league final. Just not sure how much we've learned kind of going towards the summer yet.
Yeah, we're going to come back to midfield in a minute because I want to talk about Antrims. But Picky Maher, he was back on the pitch for Laois, which is a big boost. Willie Dunphy also came in, and Aina Lyons as well. Kilkenny to put up a scoreline of 129 without TJ Reid. Impressive enough, albeit the scoring is so massive at the moment, then maybe it doesn't stand out all that much. Do you think James Bergen can start in Championship for Kilkenny with the full team there now? You know, Adrian Mullen's returning. He's probably moving up a gear all the time. TJ Reid will obviously start.
Yeah, you kind of see it when a guy is coming in and he's playing his first league campaign. I don't think he'll start. I think he'll come in. I think Cody's more likely to go back to probably a Billy Ryan or Walter Walsh if he's fit. Then obviously have TJ, Adrian Mullen, probably Mossy Keown in there as well. So I'm not sure if he'll start, but he's definitely done his cause absolutely no harm. From a Laois point of view, Shane, while the scoreboard maybe doesn't look that good to them, they actually stuck to the task, particularly in the second half, and they persisted with kind of the short game, and they got a decent bit of joy out of it in the second half. They worked the ball an awful lot better. I think sequences of play that were breaking down in earlier games stuck a good bit more. So like they're generally are playing a sweeper in most games. So everything, if you are passing through the lines, it's going to have to be very slick. From their point of view, at least it was a lot slicker than it has been, and there's a bit more optimism or a bit more signs of hope anyway going into Championship.
Yeah, I'd be curious to get some comments in from Kilkenny people about some of the things that Brian Cody tried in this game. The half back line, I think, stood out to a lot of people. Darren Corcoran, Hugh Lawler and Michael Carey was the half back line. And obviously we already talked about Richie Reid and Conor Fogarty being at the midfield. But Hugh Lawler at centre back, he's been there at full back for a long time. And, you know, Pádraig Walsh has been the one that's been nailed down for centre back for the last little while. I'm not entirely sure if Hugh Lawler at centre back would be the future there. Now, you know, club level, he's generally full back anytime I've seen O'Loughlin's in the last while, and Paddy Deegan has been the centre back for them. And obviously he likes to raid with the ball. He's well able to carry it and use it. But I'm not sure if I could see Hugh Lawler staying there. I'd definitely like to get some comments in from Kilkenny people if they have any thoughts.
I think he's a marker, Shane, is my own personal view. And I think he's a good marker. And by all accounts, just chatting to a few people that were watching that game, I didn't get to see it all myself. He was kind of caught between sticking and twisting. He's used to marking. That's like a fullback is always marking.
And you have to get used to delegating responsibility at centre back, because you're like, I have to hold. So now I'll tell Richie Reid, you have to pick him up for a minute, Conor Fogarty. And actually that's something that once the crowds come back, it's going to be more difficult to pass players off, because if there's a huge roar or a din in the crowd, you actually can't get the messages across to people.
Yeah, fair point. I think it was probably more a case of giving Pádraig Walsh a break. I don't think it's any coincidence that TJ Reid has been left out of 2 matchday 26 panels, because Cody realises he has to be injury free for Championship. And I don't think it's any coincidence that Pádraig Walsh was probably left off the other day as well. Had played nearly every minute in the first 3 games. And obviously they only played the week before too. So it would have been, you know, game on Sunday, the next Sunday, break, Sunday. So he gave him a Sunday off, which I think was smart. We talked about, you know, their most important players. He gave Owen Murphy a break to an extent too, and Darren Brennan came in and was very good. So the 3 pillars that I would see of the Kilkenny squad have Murphy, Walsh and Reid have all been left out at different stages with the long kind of game in mind, I think.
Yeah, he's been quite careful, actually, to be fair to him in that point of view, and trying to give lots of guys game time and making sure that, well, I suppose he's hoping too that you find that balance between giving lads game time and making sure you don't overwork them and kind of risk injury. We'll a couple of more tweets coming in. I'm a Galway man, but that Cork jersey is an absolute beaut. And I'm saying this as someone who that jersey would have given nightmares to back in the day. So that's orgaretro.com and use the promo code OurGame. You can get 15% off.
There's something about the Kerry Cork jersey. I can just see it in the split screen here. There's something about it. They just... like it's like
they're made for each other.
Yeah, they are. Like it's only natural that they would rival each other and they would have such a storied rivalry. They just almost look perfect together. Yeah,
absolutely. And just a reminder, people have been asking for audio podcasts of this for a long time. Finally done that. They're on the Patreon, so go to the OurGame Patreon, $5 a month, a great way to support the channel as well. So another comment in here from XDX54. Best thing from a tip point was them varying working the ball through the lines versus long ball and pot shots all the time. Have to take into account opposition, but much better link play. Yeah, I think that is a fair point. There was a nice balance to the play. Definitely didn't think it was a perfect performance from Tip, but a lot of players getting on the score sheet. So I think that's no harm for the overall confidence of the team. Build up to the Waterford match the next day, and then obviously into Championship. I'm going to move on to the Antrim Wexford game now.
Game of the weekend.
121 to 218. Red cards all around. Matt O'Hanlon was sent off for a helmet pull on Neil McManus. McManus himself ended up with a yellow card from that. Probably, I'd say his heart was in his mouth when he went in for a low ball, and kind of his rear hit one of the defenders. I'm not exactly sure who it was for Wexford. And then ultimately for leaving the hurley in when a man was soloing past him, he got his second yellow card. So both teams finished with 14 men. And also Davy Fitz was sent to the stands for a bit of an altercation with Darren Gleeson.
Was McManus a lucky boy for kind of what it looked like dropping his knee almost for the very start of that kind of row? Didn't look hectic now. I'm not saying it was that he meant to do it, but visually it didn't look good, and I can see exactly why a big row sparked off as a result of that. Like, in fairness to the Wexford boys, they waded in on the back of it.
Yeah. He probably was a little bit fortunate, and we always talk about this whole thing of playing on the edge, and I think he was probably he wasn't really getting into the game on Matt O'Hanlon. I think Matt O'Hanlon had done a great job on him, but as soon as and I'm not saying that he tried to set up the situation to get Matt O'Hanlon sent off. Obviously, I'm not saying that at all, but it was notable that his performance took off afterwards. Got a brilliant score, set up that goal for Shea Shannon with a brilliant little flick. Beautiful. Just out the side. That was very, 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 very good. Just some of the other scorers for Antrim. Now, this is where I'll come back to the midfield discussion that I had. Keelan Malloy scored 5 points from midfield and didn't get man of the match because James McNaughton beside him scored 6. Now, 3 of those were frees. But what a performance from James McNaughton and Keelan Malloy. That midfield looks brilliant. But then on the flip side, Liam McGovern was very good at midfield. He was setting up goal chances, knocked over a couple of points, might have even taken on a goal chance himself in the second half, late on. But great stuff. Some really good performances all around here.
Yeah, just on the Antrim side of things, like we've talked about James McNaughton fairly regular. Obviously, Neil McManus would have got a lot of the plaudits over the last decade. McNaughton has been unbelievable in the game so far. Conor Clark the same. Niall McKenna. Keelan Malloy. I saw Keelan Malloy when Offaly played Antrim in the World Cup final last year. He was brilliant, and it's funny that ball dropped him at the end, and he actually had no doubt that it was going to go over the bar. And he was like a poker face after as well. There was no emotion from him. It was just like, okay, I knew that was going to go over the bar. We go on and try and get the winning score. But there was a lot of like really, really good individual performances. From a Wexford point of view, it kind of is a bit mystifying in many ways that when you see what Conor McDonald can do in around the square, and even, he obviously got that first goal, which was a pass, I think, from McGovern. But when that high ball went in, he was the focal point. The ball broke off him, and Paul Morris whipped the ball to the net. Interesting this weekend as well. Yeah, that whip goal to net. Then Shane Bennett was bringing the drop puck back in vogue. I haven't seen the drop puck since Joe Errity's goal in the 1998 All-Ireland final. It was great to see a couple of those things back. But I just loved the fire in this. This was a championship match, both on the line, in the stands, and on the pitch. This had championship game intensity and championship game atmosphere to it. And and as I said, it wasn't a real high scoring game, and there's probably a reason for that as well. There was pressure with every shot that was taken, and you had to be almost so careful. There was no pot shots out the pitch or anything like that. It was a brilliant game. You could see the emotion after as well. There was a clip last night on League Sunday with Lee Chin having what looked like having words with Keith Rossiter after the game. He was obviously pretty vocal afterwards. You obviously know Davy was pretty vocal and pretty physical on the sideline as well. But it was kind of a game that had everything, really.
It was, yeah. Shane Keller is after coming in with a good comment here saying, was the Fanning double save with the help of the goalmouth keeping the ball out the best save of the last 20 years? That was a Keelan Malloy shot. Narrow angle. He got the save on it, but turned and somehow managed in the one movement to flick it out. It was absolutely brilliant. I also thought that Wexford looked unbelievably up for this game. the way Conor McDonald roared when he got that goal early on.
I love his jump. I love his jump, and he does the fist pump as a jump almost. It's brilliant. It's trademarked.
Yeah, he did the 75-day challenge, getting himself in serious nick, and you can see it out there, showing it off, and rightly so. Rory O'Connor, I think he won a free maybe in the first minute, and like he celebrated that. Obviously, Davy Fitz's performance on the sideline, he was well into it. Like I noted even just when I was making notes in the first half, Wexford are really up for it. That the energy that wasn't there during that tepid performance against Kilkenny the week beforehand, they really stepped it up here. And they went with lots of high ball into the square. That really stood out to me. And then also the fact that Liam McGovern seemed to be kind of driving at the defence of Antrim and looking to set up goals. It just seemed like a completely different team. Kevin Foley restored to the sweeper role. Liam McGovern taken out of that position, put back at midfield. It just looked an awful lot more like Wexford. And Rory O'Connor started well. He's been in scintillating form. But then he had to go off with what I think was, he limped off, possibly a dead leg, but he had to limp off. They can't afford him not to be there, because if they're going to do something this summer after, a poor enough winter last year, he has to be there, and he has to be sparking off Lee Chin, Liam McGovern, Dermot O'Keefe needs to hit top form, Conor McDonald. They need them all flying.
They need everyone, but there's probably a pillar of 3 or 4 that they just cannot be missing. They saw what happened when Chin was only able to come on in games last year. Same with Rory O'Connor. And again, like, it might only be a minor knock, but it could see him on the sideline for 2 to 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden you're like, they're playing early too. They're playing Laois. I think it's the 26th of June, so they're playing quite soon again. It's only 3 weeks away, but there was an awful lot more energy and enthusiasm from Wexford. You would have to. I just don't think the quality is there to win silverware this year. Even at this stage, I'm not sure if the quality is there to win a Leinster this year. I think there's a lot of other teams playing a lot better than they are, and just the fact that they've blown hot and then cold and then somewhat hot again. I'm not convinced by them so far.
An interesting question from Popo, anonymous account. I'd rather it wasn't anonymous, but it was an interesting one. Honest question, lads. What do you think of the punditry on RT? Bring back Lugnan and Cyril Farrell. We don't want to be carrying a thesaurus every time we watch the Sunday game. I think that's a little bit unfair. To be honest, I suppose what we try and do is you kind of match the bit of trying to have the crack, trying to be colourful, but also, go through the stats and have that sort of a level of analysis. So I always loved Gerald Lugnan doing his punditry. Always enjoyed Cyril Farrell. But I also have great time for watching the likes of Derek McGrath and Brendan Cummins, who were on it last night. So I think you can have a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of finding the balance. I thought Cyril was brilliant in the co-com as well. Because
Nuts the monkeys, Ger.
Yeah, and Santa gets a goal for Cork, and they call him Santi in college, Ger, and all these kind of things, like all these kind of great lines, and bang, back of the net. I think they all have. I think it's finding that balance of the characters and then the real kind of deep analysis of it. I do think there needs to be personality blended with, would say, real kind of forensic analysis, finding that kind of balance.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll move on to the next game that we have in the pecking order.
Just a quick one, Shane. Obviously, we kind of brushed over Davy Fitz and his passion getting him in trouble again. He obviously got sent to the line. He was like remonstrating as hard as anybody's ever remonstrated over a sideline ball at one stage. And he ended up kind of pushing into Darren Gleeson. Then he got sent to the stand, and he was just asked after. He said, what did he say? He said after the game, it wasn't the first time and probably won't be the last. Defending it by saying it was part of his passionate nature. It isn't the first time it's happened. It happens. I'm passionate. I'm not going to change. If I feel something, I'm going to fight for it. My job is to fight for Wexford. Me and Darren had some words about stuff. That's the way it goes. I wouldn't change it. Not a hope. I'm going to defend them lads, no matter what the story is. And if that's the way it goes, that's the way it goes. I think, listen, I'm not sure what to think of it, to be honest with you, but I think he's definitely not going to be indifferent this year. I'll put it to you that way. He's going to be probably true to himself. And if that's true to himself, well, then at least he's been true to himself.
Well, if he's going to ask the players to win every battle on the field, you know as well as I do that management teams talk about, look, we're going to be the best lads at handing out water during the match, or we're going to make sure that we call every decision and that the referee isn't put under pressure by the opposition, that if anything, the other manager, they're trying to react to us. So I think it's the sort of no backward step type thing, and maybe laying down markers even for later in the championship. I mean,
it's just so funny to see him squaring up to lads like Darren Gleeson's about 6'2" and Davies about 5'2". Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just I just watched it again last night on League Sunday. It's comical really when you actually state the facts of it. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, a couple other comments in here. James 6500. Who do you rate better, 2021 Antrim or 2019 Laois? Now that's a difficult one to kind of pick between. Obviously, that was when Laois had their unbeaten Dublin. Going up against Tipperary in the All-Ireland quarter-final, having previously won the Joe McDonagh Cup. Antrim look like they could kick on to another level again. I mean, it's probably a little bit early to say because we need to see Antrim in Championship, but God, they're looking good.
Yeah, I'd probably say 2021 Antrim because it already looks more consistent and they haven't been blown away in any of. They've beaten Clare, a team that got to a All-Ireland quarter-final last year. They've beaten Wexford, not beaten Wexford, they drew at Wexford, the 2019 Leinster champions. They put it up to Kilkenny, came back from 7 or 8 down, got back to level. Fair enough, they were beaten, and they were far from disgraced against Dublin as well. The question I put to you, Shane, I genuinely think Antrim are. I'd say they cannot wait to play Dublin, and they'd see that as a massive opportunity. And I will be treading carefully in the Dublin camp because those bios are going to be going for you. And I just thought, a little aside as well, it was mad. It was mad. There was pictures going around of the game in Corrigan Park, and Jerry Adams even in the background as well. It was mad. It's like something you couldn't imagine it almost.
Yeah, and another thing that I keep meaning to bring up with you when we talk about teams that are trying to go from a low level up to a higher level. You know, Antrim have been away from the top table for a while, and certainly in terms of contending for anything. But the biggest part is, like, they've always had the hurlers, and they probably will always have the hurlers. And Laois have always had great hurlers, and Offaly, you've for a lot of your history, you've had very good hurlers too. But then it's trying to match teams physically. So I always look at the likes of the NFL, for example. And you can have a team that's very much at there's 32 teams in the NFL, that, as most people know. But even the team that's at 32nd, there's probably the same level of fitness as the team that's at number 1. And sometimes in the NFL, you can draft, like, let's say, a mercurial quarterback who's going to change your offense. You can draft in 1 or 2 other players, and you can go from like a bottom feeder to challenging for the Super Bowl very, very quickly. This kind of happens. It's not uncommon. Whereas in GEA, the teams that are at the very bottom end of the scale, the teams that want to climb up the ladder, the difference in terms of fitness is it's almost ludicrous, and it's something that takes generations to fix. So it doesn't matter if you're as tasty a hurler. It just almost, how are you ever going to get 30 lads, or maybe even like a club championship where it's that sort of level of competition to compete with the teams at the top end, i.e. Limerick, Cork, Tipperary, Kilkenny, and so on. So I think that's one of the big things, that the bottom team just isn't as fit as the top team, and that creates a huge issue in terms of trying to climb up the ladder.
Yeah, if you can't match any of these teams physically, it's so difficult. Like, you're playing a different game essentially. You know, if you can't take them on for pace, if they know that they're going to be able to wear you down. I'm not sure if it takes generations, like you're saying though. Like, it's not as if these teams are doing nothing physically. It's just a matter of raising it another notch. It's a matter of having a 4 to 5 year strength and conditioning plan, But
that's a culture. And it's hard to change a culture overnight. They say it takes 6 weeks to change a habit, but to change a habit for year on year on year, like, I think every player is capable of really kind of turning their regime, their kind of diet, their fitness, their gym attendance, and all this kind of stuff, and getting a program and getting really right for 6 or 8 weeks or 1 season. But to do it year after year after year, and then have 30 or 40 lads doing it, that's very difficult.
Yeah, no, it's not simple. No, I do think lockdown would have afforded some of these counties the chance to accelerate these things if they really had their house in order. Like, I put it this way, I don't know exactly the individual work some of the Offaly lads did, but they're transformed physically compared to last year. It's just, there's no comparison whatsoever.
Counties would have gone in different directions, and this goes back to the NFL again. They'd all be doing the same. throughout that. Whereas there's so much personal responsibility, and then can our county go anywhere? You know, are we getting looked after? Whatever it might be, that there's so many variables that kind of makes it difficult for teams to climb up the rankings because they can't get that sort of collective effort, or maybe they don't have the support levels or whatever it might be. So if people have any thoughts on that, please get your comments in. I noticed Nisha, who obviously did that report for us the other day from Corrigan Park, he was doing co-commentary for TG Carr, Nisha Waldron, on the Antrim Wexford game. I don't know about you lads, but I thought I went well on co-coms. When will I be asked again? Who knows? I know he was actually very good, to be fair to him.
That's one of the lads in Borough, Sean Ryan, used to play with Offaly. He come out after a game and said, "How do you think I played?" It's like, what are you supposed to say? Like,
you were rubbish, lad. Garrod messages in on YouTube. GA needs to provide more help to counties like Antrim and Carlow, who are bent on growing the game of hurling to competitive championship level. It's great to see other counties like Kerry improve. Jack Emeralds, bring back Jared, Tomas, Cyril and Lester. That new PC crowd stink. I think that seems like a bit of an exaggeration, but each to their own. Now, are we moving on, or do you have anything more to say in that game before we do?
No, I think I just bask in what that game was, and it was a great way to kick off the whole weekend. I think it kind of set the tone for things have gotten progressively better as the weeks have gone on, in fairness, and that set perfect tone for in fairness what was a good weekend overall.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to the Clare Dublin game at Parnell Park. 34 points for the Banner and 223 for Dublin in that game. So it was a game that, to me, Clare started out quite... let me just double check my scores here, the way it ran out. Okay, so Dublin had put themselves 5 points to 2 ahead. Clare took over the game for long spells. But then in the sort of 7 or 8 minutes before half-time, Ronan Hayes moved from centre forward, where I don't think he felt the weight of the ball, into full forward. He scored 1-1 in double quick time. Then Cian Boland got a goal. Dublin looked like they were in a decent spot, leading by a couple of points at half-time. And it was kind of nip and tuck. It was like level after 43 minutes. But from then on, Clare just completely took over the game. And 20 points from Tony Kelly, a quite ludicrous 20 points. I'm not sure that many players have scored more than 20 points. I know there's plenty, you can get lots of, tallies where lads scored 215, 216, but actually 20 scores. Sure, his hands must have been falling off him for the evening after hitting the ball so much.
Yeah, I don't recall that happening any time in recent memory. 20 points is like, it's an outrageous. It's a team score basically. And in fairness to him, he just wasn't missing anything again. Looks like he hasn't missed a beat. He was out with a I think it was a dead leg, a dead quad there for a while, but hasn't missed a beat. And in fairness, Brian Lohan said after, like, we're just lucky to have him, and they are. Like, any team would be absolutely blessed to have a player like that can essentially put the ball over from any. And even like he gets a free, on the angle nearly to 65, and it's really quick thinking, quick ball to Aidan McCarthy, back to Tony Kelly, and he puts it over from the 21. Just really, really smart. A player who, has really carried last year's form, that, scintillating championship form, into this year's run. And regardless of anything that's going on in Clare, if he's on top form, he only needs a few more to keep chipping in. The Cottle Malones and the Shane O'Donnells and Aaron Shanners to keep doing what they're doing, and they will be able to put it up to some of the bigger hitters. From a Dublin point of view, Shane, I'd be half fancying Antrim for that big kind of championship game against them. Like, what did we learn much from Dublin at the weekend?
I don't think so. I think, Dublin, they kind of faded away in this game. Like, they're very patchy within games. That seems to be something that's standing out to me. The red card to Owen O'Donnell, there was 4 points in it at the time, and there was like 8 or 9 minutes of normal time to go. So, it wasn't beyond the realms of possibility that they'd turn that game around. At the same time, if he didn't actually take out Shane O'Donnell was one-on-one with the keeper, so maybe he would have buried the game from that point of view. But I still, even based on the league game a few weeks ago, and obviously league is league, and Antrim were poor on the freeze that day, I still would fancy Dublin, but their form isn't brilliant. Donald Burke, they're heavily reliant on him. As much, obviously he knocked over 9 frees, but 4 from play as well. Eamon Dillon probably didn't have his greatest game, probably needs a little bit more consistency. Around midfield, you wouldn't be entirely sure if they've the right balance just yet. Actually, interestingly, Colm Galvin made his return for Clare, and I can't really remember him touching the ball. We all know of his quality, but he stayed on for 67 minutes. And if he got more than 2 or 3 possessions, geez, I can't even say if I even remember him being on the ball 2 or 3 times. He was man marked by James Madden, from what I remember. But Dublin probably, yeah, I can't say, it just wasn't quite blown away by them. They created a nice few chances in that, but I don't know. I'm just, they need a little bit more from some of their top players. Chris Crummy kind of went as an extra man back into his own half. He was wearing number 11, but he was kind of like just on his own 65. And Conor Burke, who showed a lot of really tasty touches, he was kind of wearing number 6, and they'd sort of pass off the man, whoever was closest to a man, and someone else would sort of sit and hold the area, which is interesting to see. But yeah, they just hemorrhaging too many points. 34 was just a ludicrous score. And Aidan McCarthy, I think you might have mentioned him briefly there, another 4 points from play. He's becoming a little bit of something of a superstar.
Yeah, no, he's a very, like, there's another guy that's going to take the load off Kelly, or at least, you know, add a bit more to Clare. So I don't think it's as much doom and gloom for Clare. Like, they drew that first game against Antrim. I think they've turned things around quite nicely. Probably should have gotten a win against Wexford, but have beaten Laois and have beaten Dublin since. So I think that they've obviously playing Kilkenny next. They get another win there. All of a sudden, I think they're going in with a lot more optimism. They probably won't be expected to beat Waterford in that Munster Championship match. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't be writing them off. There's a handful of teams that they can beat. There's probably a good handful of teams that I don't think they can beat also. But, you know, the teams ranked, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10, those type of teams, I think they'll be fancying their chances going into that Waterford game. They've probably steadied the ship a bit now. And even with the Clare footballers flying in as well, the mood in the county is a lot better than it was before the league started.
Yeah, there's still, like, I'm looking at the Dublin team here, and I'm probably thinking, you know, when we talk about Kilkenny having maybe too many half-backs in the team and having to try and accommodate that and find a blend, there's possibly too many full-backs or people who play in the full-back line in the Dublin team, like Owen O'Donnell. Keane Callan's a full-back. Andrew Dunphy has come in this year and done quite well. I would have always associated Paddy Smith as being in the inside back line. So James Madden, who's playing at midfield, I would have seen him play with Ballyboden in the full back line plenty of times, if I remember correctly. I'm sure he's played in a lot of different positions because he's a very athletic and fast player. But Matty's obviously trying to find the right blend there. And Donald Burke is kind of stepping up all the time. Mark Schutte came back after injury, and he had a decent performance, scoring a point. Keane Boland scored 1-1. Couldn't understand him being taken off late on. Danny Sutcliffe, sort of an erratic performance, really good at some points, and then other times a little bit more frustrating. And Ronan Hayes, if they can get a twist out of him for 70 minutes in big championship games, he's really, really hard to stop.
He's kind of the shining light a bit, Shane, isn't he? He's the one. He's the one, you know, that could really make a difference.
Yeah, and I think
he's
maybe
been threatened to, you know.
Yeah, at a countrywide level, maybe people aren't necessarily paying quite as much attention to him because Dublin aren't the biggest draw going, but he definitely is worth paying attention to. Popo says Dublin can't just seem to push on to the next level. I think that 2018 game versus Kilkenny and Leinster was their chance to progress. After that, they've stagnated. Can see Antrim causing a shock. I'd love to know what other people think as well. Obviously, I'm more sticking on the Dublin side of things for that game.
Wouldn't be like you. Wouldn't be like you.
Wouldn't be like me, the Gobles for Dublin, as you like to say. Right, so we'll move on now to, very good performance from Clare, scoring 34 points. And we'll see how they get on now as things go on. Carlow beat Meath 5-28 to 17 points. Now, they've been somewhat erratic throughout this league campaign. So I think Tom Mullally will be feeling an awful lot better about things after putting up a scoreline like that.
Yeah, I think Marty Kavanagh went to town as well. I didn't focus too much on this game because we're an hour and 20 minutes nearly in, and we're finally getting to the meat and drink of today's show, and Offaly getting back to the top table. Another really, really good, thorough, clinical performance. Never really looked in doubt. Their 4 games in the league, they've kind of had them fairly well under control by half time. They scored 12 goals in their 4 games. They've averaged just under 35 points per game. And similar to Cork, they're just going for green flags every chance they get. It's really, really hard to say. And I've just chatted to a few people around Offaly about this. Like, the squad has generally been the same this year as it was last winter. But something's obviously just flicked because they look, well, physically, as I said, they do look a different kind of animal. But they're just playing just serious stuff this year, in fairness to them. Michael Verney couldn't really put his finger on it. He said the principles are still the same, hasn't changed much. He said it's the only thing that he probably would say is that they're now a selfless side, and they always give the ball to the man in the right position. And that was blatantly obvious at different stages yesterday when maybe lads would have went for their own score, trying to take their own goal. They were always giving it to the lad on the shoulder. But listen, I'm not under any illusion about how difficult it's going to be in Division 1. To the best of my knowledge, they would be replacing Westmeath in that Group 1A when they do go up, which is going to be a very, very difficult task. But they're there, and there's kind of green shoots again. And it's just that there's a lot of good things happening in the county. The minor hurlers and footballers are in delayed finals from 2020. The footballers are in the Division 2 semi-final. They win, they're promoted. And the Camogie and ladies footballers aren't going too bad either. Well, particularly the ladies footballers. And Lowry's flying it in the golf again. So, like, it's just, it's all good. It's great. No, not been smart, Shane. Like, there's been enough negativity, and it's sometimes it's very easy to jump on things when things are going bad. But the wheel does seem to have turned in a major fashion. The main goal, I would have said, for 2021, whatever about winning the ring, because they should be winning that hands down, was getting back up to Division 1, and they've accomplished that already and done it in a really, really comprehensive fashion.
How important has Michael Dignan taken over as chairman been?
Well, it seems to have set the wheels in motion for a lot of other things going on behind the scenes. And I was only chatting to him this morning, actually, and he was just saying he's tried to even get away himself from a lot of having too much focus on the administrative side of things. He wants to focus on the hurling of football. He wants to know exactly, he says he wants to know every hurler and footballer from the age of 15 to 35 in the county and what different clubs are going on. He's in at training sessions the whole time. He's in all these matches the whole time. He's his finger on the pulse. Obviously, his own young fella, Brian, is playing. He actually scored a goal after 12 seconds yesterday, which is the fastest league goal I can remember in recent times. But even getting Lowry on board with this kind of partnership is just massive as well. It's just so much more optimism flying around the county, and it's hard beat that kind of energy that's going around now. And I can't wait till people get to go back at matches, because a lot of Offaly people had stopped going to matches. Things were going quite badly, and they were almost, getting fed up of getting beaten or whatever. But the wheel has definitely well and truly turned, and it's exciting again. And fair play to them. There's about 10 of them under the age of 23 as well, which is a really, really positive long-term sign. And when you're talking about developing physically, those guys are all at that captive age where over the next 2 to 3 years, they can, if they really want it, they can push themselves to get up to the physical level of a Limerick or a Cork or whoever. So that's exciting in that respect as well.
Yeah, and if you're looking, people will be back in matches soon. If you're looking to get a jersey, there's plenty of Offaly stock there at orgaretro.com, and use the promo code OurGame and you get 15% off. Shane Brophy of the Nina Guardian, he tweeted about, relating to Offaly going up. He tweeted, as things stand, Division 1 hurling league groups for 2022 are Tip, Wexford, Clare, Waterford, Limerick and Westmeath/Laois in one. Kilkenny, Galway, Cork, Dublin, Antrim, Offaly likely to be shaken up after next weekend's fixture. So obviously that's not confirmed at all. But it'll be fairly tantalising to see your county back up there.
And it's going up on a different curve now. Do you know what I mean? They're actually coming up with a bit of optimism. They've got a lot of games under their belt. I was chatting Ben Keneally.
Similar to Offaly in a way, to Antrim in a way, that they're going up and they're thinking, right, they look in good shape, they're playing a good brand of hurling, things can go well here.
Yeah, exactly. And like you're talking about like attacking threats, and you think like Liam Langton scored 2-3 yesterday, Owen Cattle got 5 from play, Oisin Kelly got a goal. They've lots of different lads that can contribute, and I think their style of play is an awful lot better than it was. We would have been agricultural, to say the least, 10 years ago, whereas tactics have definitely been modernised. You can definitely see Johnny Kelly's influence on it as well. They play through the hand an awful lot, and while that might have broken down last year when they mightn't have had too much time to hone in on it, it definitely seems to be sticking now, and good signs.
Okay, and just to touch back on the Carlow victory over Meath, just some of the men who put up some big scores there. Mouse Kavanagh, he put up 112. Kevin MacDonald got a couple of goals, 1-5 for Chris Nolan, Michael Nolan with 1-3, and plenty others.
John Michael,
he scored as well. So Kerry also had a bit of a thumping win over Wicklow, 430 to 117. A couple of goals from Mikey Boyle and 113 from Shane Conway put Kerry in good order there down in Tralee. And the Kerry had made wholesale changes from their win over Meath, but never looked at any bother whatsoever. Now, jumping on to Division 2B, Derry beat Donegal 322 to 321. What a free, unbelievable score in here. And then Kildare under David Herity, 425 to Roscommon's 10 points. To me, it's something, the thing that's standing out about Kildare is the manner of their victory. So their scoring differential after 3 games is plus 69. I mean, that they're not, everyone else in the Division 2B has a negative scoring differential. So Donegal -9, Mayo -4, Derry -12, and Roscommon -40. So they're absolutely pasting teams in this division.
Well, if you look at it, like Kildare won the ring final last year to beat Down. Aside from that Offaly game yesterday, Down have acclimatised really, really well in Division 2A and have their status for next year again. Roland Sheaton was saying after that, if you said to him with 2 games to go in 2A that they'd have their status for another year, he'd be absolutely delighted to have that. Kildare obviously seeing, a side that they beat in the Ring Cup final last year, thinking like, we need to, if we're going to push on, it's one thing being in the Joe McDonagh, but we need to get up to 2A and we need to try and be around that equation to try and get up and play Division 1 hurling. Put up a massive score, 423 from play yesterday. And I think David Slattery got 2-1. Like David Slattery and Johnny Byrne, 2 ex-Kildare footballers, both contributing handsomely up front. And they've Brian Byrne as well, who could easily be on the Kildare football panel, a very good attacker. Jack Sheridan, James Burke, Rian Bourne, centre-back, Paul Divley. Like, they have a really, really good core of players. And you've obviously seen David Herity at close quarters with Kula. Very, very good coach, very astute, has his finger really, really on the pulse. So, like, they're in pole position to get up to 2A, and like not before time probably as well. It's probably somewhere they need to be for their own long-term development as well.
Yeah, Larry McCarthy presented his first trophy since taking over the role of president of the GEA, as Louth beat Fermanagh to secure promotion and also the Division 3B title. Also in that division, Cavan beat Leitrim 120 to 117. Without my club mate, Brian Breezer Fitzgerald, who cried off. I knew before the game that he wasn't going to be playing. But, I can't give anything away from the camp. Privileged information, all that. He went down sucking like a baby during training last week. I was marking him and he went down. He was nowhere near me, but he was looking for an excuse to cry off from the training. And he obviously wasn't available for this game. But hopefully he'll be back soon. But
nice to know you have a lot of sympathy for him. Anyway.
Yeah, couldn't resist having an old pop. Any more thoughts before we finish up? I might just bring up a comment here from a couple of people. Sylvia, too much ball handling. Hurling should be should be used more so as to develop real hurling skills to bring greater passion to the game.
I think what he's saying is there's too much hand passing, Shane, basically, yeah.
Yeah, Adrian McGrath, analysis of Cork over the top in terms of selection, but other than Horgan, Harnedy, O'Mahony, the calls are marginal. Meanwhile, Dan Morrissey, Hayes, Hegarty, Flanagan didn't play. Very, very fair point. But the point that I was making, Adrian, was what will come back to the Cork team will bolster them an awful lot more than what it will do for Limerick, because those are all brilliant players that you're naming for Limerick. But the jump off, the difference between the second in line in the positions for Cork versus Limerick, there's a bit more of a gap, I would have thought. Would you be of the same mind?
No, I would, yeah. Like in fairness, and Hayes was missing because he was suspended, and Flanagan was missing because he was suspended too. So there's nothing, there's nothing they could do about that. But yeah, Limerick, Limerick have a very, very settled team, whereas when you pull some of those mainstays out of the Cork team, they do look very, very inexperienced at times. So yeah, I think that's going to be a really intriguing championship game when they meet in the summer. Conditions are perfect for Cork style as well, and they're probably only going to get better too. So that's going to be really interesting when they meet later on in the summer.
Okay, so that's it for the Hurling Show this week. If you want to get the audio podcast, go to the Patreon. The link is under the video on the YouTube video. I'm sure
2 cups of coffee. 2 cups of coffee, even
for
less.
A month. $5 for a month, and audio podcasts, lots of archive interviews, and just a reminder that we are brought to you by OurGame. By orgaretro.com. The promo code is OurGame if you want to get 15% off. Thank you very much, Michael Verney. We'll chat again soon.
Cheers, Shane. Good man.